Well, kia ora koutou. I think there's a number of you scattered around the country there tuned in for this webinar. Welcome. We know there's a lot more people going to join us, and technology enables us to sort of do a count. So we understand there's about 35 of you out there, but we know a lot more registered. So we're just going to have a bit of a casual conversation for a few minutes till the numbers get up, and then we'll hit the we'll rip into the webinar. So you know, Lizzie's sitting here on my left, so we're going to do casual conversation, Lizzie, just to fill it in. Yep. And Jenny's sitting there in Whanganui. Welcome, Jenny.
Kia ora.
Now, in the casual conversation, we could sort of, I know, we could mention that awesome award that the team you're a part of at Waitangirua won last week. What was that award, Lizzie?
Okay, so we were at the Japan's Cutting Edge Conference. Well, not at the conference, but I got an invite to go to the dinner at the conference, and lo and behold, we won the Supreme Award in regards to our initiative. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's the initiative. You're going to talk a bit more about that shortly in the webinar.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I was at that awards dinner as well, but I was a really supportive team member that had to leave before Lizzie even got the award. I got called out for family reasons, so I missed out on that presentation. So bother. Yeah. Well, that was cool. You got any little goss from up Whanganui there, Jenny? Can people hear Jenny? Yep. Is there any sort of key highlights of your day so far, Jenny, that spring to mind?
Whanganui is a great place to be, and it's just a normal day here in Whanganui. Congrats, Lizzie. That's great.
Thank you, Jenny.
Yeah.
So you sort of sent all the children home today, so you haven't got sort of a delightful mayhem in the background, or you're in a quiet part of your place?
Very quiet part of our place, but probably it will turn into mayhem before we finish, so we'll just feel right at home. Yeah.
I'm sure that will add a rich learning environment and quite experiential for the members of the webinar, so it'll be cool.
For all of us, hey? Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, okay.
We've got 55 attendees.
Well, I've got the nod that we're over 50 attendees, so ngā kaimahi o Aotearoa, i ngā hau e whā, kia ora koutou katoa, nau mai haere mai ki tēnei webinar. It's great to have you all joined in to this initiative where we get to share in some of the insights from a couple of the 21 initiatives that were part of the Child Rich Communities project. And I'm pleased to introduce two of the people that are going to speak for those two initiatives. Sitting next to me here in Wellington in the UNICEF studio is Lizzie McMillan.
Kia ora everyone.
And LinkedIn, sitting there in the wonderful Whanganui, is Jenny.
Kia ora koutou.
So for those of you that have done a few webinars, it's standard process. For those of you that are new, I'm just going to say a little bit about the process. Hopefully this can be interactive and not just the three of us talking the whole time. The way for that to happen is for you to ask questions, and you'll notice in your menu box for the go-to webinar, at the bottom there's a little text box. So if during the conversations, during Lizzie or Jenny's conversation and sharing, that triggers a question for you, type that in the box there, hit the enter, and then Prudence, who is in our studio here, there we are, welcome Prudence, she will get your question, and then she will, at the appropriate time, feed that question to whoever's appropriate to try and have the conversation. If 30 or 40 of you ask the same question, she might merge the question or pick one of the key questions. So we do encourage you to ask your questions so that we can respond to issues as they come up during the webinar. Other than that, we'll try and keep it informal and casual as one can in an environment like this, and start to run through the various initiatives and slides.
By the way, Dave, Kim Button wants to tell you that you're looking cool.
Oh, thanks, Kim. So just for your information, we'll go, there's 21 initiatives So that's some of the photos of some of the energy and creativity that were part of those 21 initiatives. And if you see a map of where they were, that's just to give you an idea of those places and groups that we harvested the insights and knowledge and questions and frustrations, and that formed the basis of the Child Rich Community Resource. We want to really be clear that there's far more than 21 communities doing awesome stuff with children across the country, but they were 21 that we started with and had some contact with. And we wanted just to highlight the deep knowledge and insights that sits in communities that is really passionate about them being great places for children to grow up within. While we're talking about geography and membership, I just want to note, I've got here a list of a vast range of people and organisations that are part of this webinar today, and it's really great to have the diversity in terms of geographical diversity from the top of the north, bottom of the south. We've got small rural towns and play centre groups and Bernardo's groups. We've got central government agencies, we've got local government, we've got iwi organisations, we've got someone from Uzbekistan. No, I don't know if I have. I don't think they're having a bit of trouble getting on. But we've certainly got a real spread of people and organisations across the Motu. So that's great that you've taken some time to be part of this webinar. So there's just 3 lessons out of the Child Rich Communities report we're going to touch on today. One is local people as the greatest asset. The second one about enabling people to dream again. And the third about moving beyond social services. And I'm just going to put up this slide, and don't worry, we'll come back to this slide later on at the end of the webinar. But this is one way of trying to capture the dynamics and that happen in a local community when local communities start self-organising and having some conversation. So it's the theory of change that we've developed in inspiring communities with lots of different communities to help us try and understand what happens. And so that's something that hopefully at the end, when Jenny and Lizzie have shared some of their story and some of their insights, we'll come back to this and try and see if this adds some value to what we're hearing and what we're learning. So that's sort of a bit of a preamble, an introduction from me. I'm going to start, we'll start with Lizzie, and kia ora Lizzie, and welcome, and feel free just to reflect on some of your insights and journey at Waitangirua and Pororua.
Cool, okay, thank you. So kia ora everyone. Yes, like David said, I manage a hub out in Waitangirua and Pororua, and I am a part of Wesley Community Action. But more than that, I am a daughter and a wife and a mother, and I play a big role in my community as well. My family have been there for over 50 years, so I'm very well connected in my community, and everybody knows who everyone is. So last year, there was a big gap in our community, and a lot of whānau have been affected by methamphetamine. A lot of our children pretty much being left hung out to dry, not able to get to school, all that kind of stuff because of this drug and the effect on their whānau. So after trying to helping to get a young mum some help, she was having a psychotic episode, and I couldn't get help, and I'm pretty well connected. I actually even sat on a meth reduction table in Pororua, and I was still banging my head against a brick wall trying to find help for this mum. So I thought, that's it, stuff this. I'm just going to open up the door. I don't know what this is going to look like, but I know that the people will come, and there's got to be another way around supporting people in my community. So we've actually just had 1 year where we opened up our very first walk-in, not knowing what it looked like or who would come, but we're 1 year to the date pretty much, and I've had 118 whānau and addicts come through the door trying to find a way to get off the drug.
Lizzie, you said you opened a walk-in. What's a walk-in?
So a walk-in is a safe space where anyone can just walk on in, and what we have there is education, we have awareness, I have other parents. I have addicts who are going through recovery or who are about to go into withdrawal, and we just exchange experiences. We talk about it. You will see an addict or an ex-addict give a whānau member advice on how to cope, what to look for, what to expect, and how to understand what your whānau is going through. And a lot of grandparents are raising children today, so there's a lot of grandparents that come through, and it's advice for them on how to manage this and what to look for. And it's about being prepared when a loved one does put their hand up and say, I want to get clean. It's knowing how to respond, because this is the unknown. We don't know, and that's what the frustration and the mamae is for everyone. So the walk-in addresses that stuff at a real grassroots level of life experience.
So there's probably been lots of really rich conversations around that table in the walk-in.
Yes.
And in those conversations, is there what's been said about the impact on children of the drug P? Or
the impact is huge on the children. Yeah,
right.
we even have children in our community who have gone to school and got themselves uplifted from their own homes. That's how bad this is. They no longer feel safe. They don't know who their parents are. They know that they're not being looked after, and they've gone to school and got themselves uplifted for safety, you know.
Wow, so that's the children taking the initiative and actually initiating action for them to be in a safer, better space. Okay, right.
Yeah. So I don't know, this photograph that you actually see of all these young boys that are in the t-shirt, sorry, I just want to point out, like, majority of these boys have been affected. They've had fathers that have died. They are young kids who have been addicts themselves, and every year we go off to Makoia Island. So just this one photograph, most of these boys were affected by it one way or another, hence them wearing the t-shirt on Makoia Island in this photograph. Just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
Cool. So with the walk-in, yes, we now have 7 walk-ins right across New Zealand, more in the North Island. We've just come back from Murupara in the weekend. And again, it's just communities are looking for solutions everywhere, and it's always going to come back to the children. The children have lost parents, and they are grieving their parents, and grandparents are grieving the loss of a child also. So the walk-ins kind of take care of that.
Right.
It's a space where people can go in and put your heart out on the table. People cry, people are very emotional, but because we have a lot of addicts there in recovery, they actually find solutions and how to walk around this and get through it.
And who runs the walk-in, or how's it organised?
So the walk-ins are not funded. There is no funding gone into this whatsoever. It is just people with passion and with heart. So all anyone needs is a space to run this. And like me, when I first started, I might work for Wesley, but I'm not contracted to run anything like this. So I made sure I had a bag of flour every week, and I don't know, it was like a carb Monday, pikelets, or it was fry bread, or it was scones, and that's what got us through it. Now that we've grown and they know that we're there, a lot of the people that were coming to the table started bringing sandwiches, and they were doing their own baking, and these t-shirts we now sell, and that's the sole purpose. We sell them to get our travel, to get our morning tea, and to just help us stay alive in the space, I guess.
So it's locally led and locally funded, and so the community of interest support and buy the t-shirts that help support the initiatives.
I've got a question here for you, Lizzie, from Lisa Woods. Kia ora, Lizzie. How did you get word out that the walk-in was there for people?
I promoted it myself, so I organised a launch. So there was one day where I was going to do the opening. I contacted the local newspaper, did a story. I went around to every single place where I knew someone would be sitting, so takeaway bar, the pokie machines in the pub, it would have been the cafes, the health centres, anywhere I thought someone would be sitting. I went and plastered flyers everywhere.
So I'm interested, Lizzie, in terms of what you noticed or how that change that was triggered by the walk-in and all that impacted on parenting and people as parents. And as you say, they may be grandparents or just adults, and how they actually supported the children.
Yeah, well, that's quite big, and it's a real sensitive conversation. So for the addicts that are in recovery or just going through withdrawal, they are beginning to rediscover themselves as clean parents. That's what they
Right.
call themselves. I'm now a clean parent, and maybe some of these children have never had a clean parent, so they have had to go right back. Once they've gone through recovery, they're now attending like our parenting program to figure out who they are and what that looks like. They've got triggers, they've got stuff that they've learnt, so it is very small baby steps that they've had to go right back to. So when they come off methamphetamine, it is learning how to sleep again, it's learning how to eat again, it's learning about your own anxieties and
Right.
depression. So they can take a toll on children in the house.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they really need to consider where they're at, and this is where we talk about having a plan in place, and it's creating a whole new routine and structure in their lives, because it's for the benefit of the children.
Right.
And every person that comes to our walk-in, it's because of a child that's been affected. So for an addict, the bottom line is my children have just been removed. I need to get off this shit. My kids are gone.
Right.
And that's the drive.
Hey, from Gillian Bowler, I've got a question back to the T-shirts. Where can we buy the T-shirt?
Oh.
Nice one,
The
Julian.
nightmare of the T-shirts. You'd probably have your best to join our New Zealand People page. We for this initiative, we have a page and it's called New Zealand People. We probably need to spell that out later on so you've got it correctly, and you can request a T-shirt there. So just moving on now, I was talking about parents finding themselves again, and the people that come to our walk-in. So we're not, I guess the beauty of this initiative is we're not governed by anybody. No one can kind of tell us what to do really, and the people that come through the door are the people that lead the space. That's how it's working out in every other space throughout New Zealand. So I said we've got 7 walk-ins, and we're all just local parents or ex-addicts in recovery that are now running those spaces, and we all touch base with each other. So every time someone else has a walk-in, they'll give us a call, we talk together, we debrief, we all kind of touch base like that.
Yeah.
But without those people, we wouldn't be able to do anything. So it's really important about the people that come through the door, the passion and the wanting to give back. So my role is to, well, from the start, my role, I started the structure and implemented what I knew as a social service worker about having a good space where there was respect and making sure that we run it really, really well. And then I've been able to pass that on. So I might step back once I see the different strengths and the other leaders at the table. You can see who they are ready to grow and move in that space. So they come in, and I can be there once a month now if I have to, because they take over. And
so what you've noticed is, I mean, you have to establish a process and some of those core values, and that sounds quite simple.
Yeah.
But then, just as long as those are maintained, it runs itself, and there's new leaders or people coming up out of that group that actually then step into leadership roles, and you help support them at times.
Yeah, and because this is not rocket science, there's nothing clinical to this. It's basically a space and coffee and kōrero from the heart. So just making sure that people are not talking over each other. It's really basic stuff, and the rest just happens.
What if you do have a character comes in that's quite dominating and maybe threatening and undermining the safety of that space? That's a challenging situation. Any thoughts on how you respond to that? Yeah,
I guess like when people come through, we haven't had it happen yet, touch wood, but we have enough strength and skill at the table that the right person would step up and probably just take care or manage that in the best way possible. So because there's a few of us at the table, someone could politely take someone off, off to the side, have a kōrero and do that on their own, one-on-one type thing, or I don't know, we just keep it tight at the table. We watch what's said, we watch who's saying it, we do watch how often people talk, and we make sure not one person is always dominating the table.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, just for viewers, you mentioned the Facebook page, and when we're saying people, that's how people spell. So you can see it's P-pool, and the Facebook page, if they just search on the Facebook people,
New Zealand people.
New Zealand people, And that's that response to that question about buying a t-shirt. But also you'll see this very active and alive online community, which is supporting, I think, up to about 4,500 people now in this journey across New Zealand and that.
Yeah.
Lizzie, I was just going to check before about, you know, how do we know what we're doing is making a difference in that, you know, so there's this, obviously there's feedback from the people there and just what you pick up in the conversations. Is there any other tools or things you use to help keep the focus on what the outcomes or how it's...
Yeah, so the group session rating score is what we use. So we have a form that goes out at the end of every session. There we go. And that kind of marks the relationship at the table. So people will always let us know if they felt understood and respected, if we talked about what they wanted us to talk about, and if the leader's approach was a good and overall. So out of 118 people, I can tell you right now, we've had about 3 that have scored quite low. But again, all in learning, that's been because one of their parents have been facilitating at the table. So we have learned, like if mum's facilitating, maybe mum needs to make sure she's not on that week and someone else takes over.
And just for people's background, that what's called a group session rating scale, that's part of, this sounds all very jargon, I'm sorry, but PCOM, so Partners for Change Outcome Management System. So it's one of the tools in that kitty that can just really help give some regular feedback about is it working. So if you've got a question or want some information, we can put some web links up for you to sort of follow that up.
Yeah,
and that.
And just to quickly mention, the page is a walk-in. It's a giant scale walk-in. So what happens on the page is what happens in our walk-in. But on the page, we've got 4,500 people helping each other through this epidemic.
It's more of a sit-in, isn't it, than a walk-in?
Yeah.
Guys, can I just do something here? What's the spelling of people again, from Cornelia Baumgartner? Can I just hold that up and maybe you can see? No, you can't. It's, you spell out New Zealand and then put the P in inverted commas and then pull. That's what you'll find. And look at that membership. That's over 4,000 strong. Not sure if you want to join the group or not, but go ahead and take a look at the page.
Cool. Okay, so enabling people to dream again. When people come to the table, they're pretty broken. The addicts are broken, they are. And the caregivers or parents of, they come to the table and they're just down and out and in the dump. So I think when we all meet at the table, it's about have people being able to dream again, to think about their future, to think about what's going on, how am I going to get through this. I mean, just yesterday, I had a huge group of addicts in recovery. It was probably the biggest group of just addicts in recovery, and one whānau member who, for the first time in her life, realised there's some PED behaviour going on in her home. So the session yesterday was just mind-blowing because this woman had all these addicts to herself answering all her questions. So one addict in recovery, I don't really like saying that word addict, but you know, maybe one person who used to use, he was looking at another girl who was 50 weeks clean, and he was just like, I want to be you. I want to be just like you. I can't wait to get to where you are. He was like 3 months clean, but he just seen it in her face and said, I want to be you. And then when you hear them all talking and laughing about that behaviour, and they're laughing, and you know, there was so much laughter yesterday, but yeah, they've got through it, and now it's time for you to dream and figure out, you know, where you go to next. How do you get your family back? You know, how do you reach your potential once again and be a normal human?
Because I know when I go onto the people page, Lizzie, there's so much affirmation. You know, someone will say, oh, I'm 3 weeks clean. And instantly there's all these responses from people all around the country giving lots of encouragement. So it's really strength-based. It's just totally affirming and strength-based through the whole process. I wonder, people out there have seen a photo there with you next to a woman there. Do you want to say who was that person?
Okay, so this is Judge Kelly. She is a famous judge down our neck of the woods, and everyone calls her a woman with an iron fist. And a lot of people that use our programs will come to our walk-in. They all know Judge Kelly and appear in front of her daily almost.
So she's a judge at the local district court?
She's our local judge, and she's a hard woman. So, you know, when we last year we ran our parenting program, and we invited Judge Kelly to come in and give out the certificates to our whānau, and quite a few of them were appearing the very next day, and thought maybe she'd be really impressed that she'd take away bail conditions and things like that. And she was so pleased to be there and see another side of the community where these parents were making an effort. They stuck it out for 14 weeks, and they were impressed to see her as a caring judge outside of the courts,
And that's, it's great to have that sort of connection within the community between the judiciary and a parenting course.
Yeah.
Just that parenting course. There's lots of parenting courses out there, Lizzie. What's the...
Yeah. So again, there's 3 of us on my team, and we facilitate Incredible Years. And for those of you who know Incredible Years, it's a really good program. It's a very long program. It's 14 weeks. And for myself too, coming from the community I come from, it took me 3 goes to check out this program until I thought, would it actually fit in my community? So me and my team have actually managed to take it from the Brady Bunch and be able to deliver it to the Hickeys. And that's kind of worked out really cool, because we need them to be able to understand this program, because it's such a good program, but you need to shape it to fit the people in your community. Right. So we've just changed the language that we use. We use our own life experiences, which we know they will relate to, and we just deliver it in a way that fits them.
Oh, that's excellent. Well, I'm sure other people out there listening are familiar with Incredible Years or other sorts of parenting programs that, as you say, bring in some really good information, some really good research base and knowledge about it. But it's how you contextualise and deliver that in local language and the local context, which sounds like a really rich process. And also, if you're linking in with the People Initiative, that's also a place to help people who are having to relearn or learn from scratch.
Yeah.
What parenting is when they're in their clean state. So
it's all about parents, and this is our service aim that you see. So no matter what we do in my service, so I manage 7 government contracts. This is what we do, and it's how we do it. We aim to bring out the best in parents, families, individuals, and groups, and all we do is support them to connect their own dots to change their pathway. So it's not about us. It's always about them. And a lot of our whānau will come through the door, and we may be contracted to do this or do that, but we actually allow them to mould us in a way that's going to fit them.
Well, that's a really lovely summary, Lizzie, that sort of tries to sort of pull together what is a really, complex and exciting and at times, I'm sure, challenging initiative there in Waitangirua. So there may be some other questions that you have out there about that. So if you've got those, type them in, and we might have to keep those till the latter part or the end of this webinar if we've got time. But I want to shift the focus now onto Jenny. Kia ora, Jenny, who's sitting there in Whanganui, and sort of say, look, we're really keen to hear about some of your journey and some of your initiatives in that community with the children and parents and other actors in that community. So, Jenny.
Kia ora, welcome to Whanganui, a couple of hours up the road, Lizzie. A lot of our story is similar to Lizzie's story, but in quite a different setting. So welcome to Central Baptist Kindergarten. We are part of the Whanganui community. Can you go to the next slide, Zeb? So one of our parents said this of the kindy, it's not just a kindy, and that's, I guess, how we like to see ourselves. The kindergarten itself's been in the community since 1980. So quite a while now, and has always wanted to be responsive to what was happening, the needs of whānau in the community, and so over many years has looked and listened and just seen how as a kindergarten we could respond to needs in the community. Always looking for gaps and ways of not replicating other things that were already in the community. So just being aware of those things as well. And it's described, the kindergarten's described as a wraparound service, so it's quite holistic in its approach. Next.
I'm interested, Jenny, and maybe this is what you're going to reveal. When we say holistic, I mean, that's a very easy term to say, because we say, we have a holistic, but it's really quite cool in this to sort of unpack what we mean, what does it look like and feel like if something's holistic, and how do we know we're heading in the right direction?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I guess holistic, and I think Lizzie referred to it, it's about where the person's at, and so that journey is their journey, and it's supporting the individual journey and what is whole around that person. And so in our setting, we've tried to embed different things in the community and be involved in them. So one of the things that we've put into the community is the hippie program, and that's home interaction program, and it's a program for parents who want to be alongside their children aged 3 and 4 and just getting involved there. So it's quite intentional. Every one of the parents that is involved in that wants the best for their child, whatever that looks like. Skip's also been introduced into the community, and so this is another part of the wholeness, I guess, for 10 or 12 years, so funded by the Ministry of Social Development, offering information for parents and strategies for kids, other way around, strategies for kids and information for parents, but offering positive parenting messages in lots of different forms. And for 10 or so years, that's been quite event-based, but it's quite a nice way for families to connect into positive parenting experiences. And I guess in the last couple of years, it's become neighbourhood based. So looking in the neighbourhoods for the champion leaders and who they are and how they can be sustainable in their own communities. And then,
sorry, just Jenny, in the last couple of years, it moved from more of an events based to neighbourhood and that. I mean, what was some of the things, the catalysts that actually encouraged or supported that shift?
One is funding. So a move by the government to, I guess, make parenting and supporting parents more sustainable. So moving it into the neighbourhoods was where the reality is, and a champion parent steps up, takes the lead of a small group of parents, and they're going to meet each other in the supermarket or at the library or at the beach or wherever they happen to connect, but they're going to be interconnecting and interweaving with other families. And so it becomes a model that's much more sustainable in community.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and 10 or 11 years ago, another project from the government was something called a Parent Support and Development, and alongside the kindergarten we developed something called 303, which is just the street address for where 303 sits in the street that we are on. And the aim of that program, or that goal, was to just be involved with families with positive messages. So to start that program, we had two mums who were gatherers, and we would call them gatherers so they could easily connect with other parents, and they would gather other parents. And we started both of those sessions with a coffee morning, and very quickly in one of the groups, the coffee morning created some connections and people came along, and one of the mums said, "Hey, could we be a cooking group?" And she said, "I've always had this dream of I want to teach cooking." And so we looked at that and we looked at what that meant, and we worked out that, hey, we could do this. All we needed was an oven and a pot and some other bits. And so we worked out that that could happen, and that cooking group ran not with the same facilitator but with different parents over years for about 10 years. So just finding things like that. One of the things that we noticed from that is that connection, and Lizzie talked about it too, the parent to parent, and just how sharing and growing those skills changes up what happens in communities. Thanks, Seb. So one of the words that we talk about a lot is being alongside, and we're alongside parents for lots of years. Parents can connect, they can disconnect, they can reconnect, and there's sort of no time frame around that. Our whānau support, because we're in a smaller community, we get to meet the people who might be supporting our whānau along the way, so local counselling services or Wins or whoever it might be, we get to meet them before we connect families with them, and we found that to be really important. And often we'll go with a family to our first kōrero and at least take them there or pick them up, so we can have kōrero around the support that happens with that. And one of our other things, or lots of things, Lizzie talked about the parent-to-parent and the incredible years. So 303 offers lots of other things too, like informal drop-in centre and toolbox and Building Awesome Whanganui, which is another parenting course based here in New Zealand. We offer home visiting, so we can go into homes, which is sometimes safer for families, and families, it's on their turf, so that kōrero happens there as well. And sometimes it's as simple as having a big cook-up and sharing kai or sharing a meal, dropping a meal off for a family. So being alongside in lots of different ways. And one of our...
I was going to say, interesting how that theme of food and sharing food, either preparation or eating. I mean, Lizzie talked about the pikelets and the scones at the walk-in. And it sounds like...
I learned to make scones too, Lizzie. I think it was interesting when we reviewed 18 months in, and the parents that we were reviewing with said, oh gosh, there's been a real change. It's moved from food to people. So we started with food in a big way, and then the people were always centre stage, but suddenly the food was less important, so we didn't need it quite so much. So interesting, eh?
It is. Just to pause, Jenny, just to remind to the people who are listening out there, again, if you've got any questions or things you want to sort of test or check out a bit more with Jenny, just type your questions away, and Prudence is sitting here and she'll feed those questions in as it goes. So just a reminder there for people to ask some questions. Sorry, Jenny.
Oh, all good, David. One of the things that we like to do is be visible in the community. So on a Friday at the moment, in terms 1 and term 4, we spend time in our local park and we just hang out there. And this has proven to be a space where other community people can come and connect families in with us in quite an informal way. So I'm thinking of a midwife who came regularly and brought along her people to connect in, so that we could be alongside supporting them as they journeyed from, well, moved on from being with a midwife, I guess. But yeah, that just being available in the park has been really good as well. Thanks, Seb.
Oh, that pretty much sums it all up, Jenny. I think really that diagram just crystallises what you've all been saying.
Well, it's a little bit like the theory of change, isn't it? This diagram has a story behind it. It's a mum, and it's a mum who used soft doors to start with. So she came along to a skip event, and it was a brainwave trust presentation, and from that she recognised for herself that what was happening in her home wasn't really good, and so she decided that it needed to change. Her children needed to not be neglected, and things needed to change. And so this mum connected in with at 303, and over a long period of time her journey unfolded and evolved. In her words, she said, I sat on the couch for a year and you allowed me to do that. And my recollection of that is not the same as hers. I would never have thought of her sitting on the couch. She was a contributor in her way at the time. But after a year, she was able to contribute in a much bigger way, and she became an integral part of what was happening at 303 and in the community. And one of our research topics we were talking about is, how do we build better community, or how do we capture that? And she said one morning, just as our researcher was leaving, she said, I think I've got it. And we drew this diagram. And she talked about the connections from 303 and how they had strengthened what was happening for her, and how home and family and 303, the kindergarten and school, have become really important places for her. and how the people that she was meeting at 303 were people she would also see at school or at kindy or at church or in other places in the community.
So Jenny, can I clarify, because there's probably some rich stuff in drawing a sort of a geospatial diagram like that. So when she was talking about on the couch and when early on in the journey, there probably wasn't so many points of connections. Is that so? Over time, did that change? Is that part of it? So
yeah, I think she had the connections, but they weren't strong. So
right.
In this setting, her family wanted to be supportive, but she didn't want their support. So it was about not that she didn't want it. It wasn't that important to her, and then she discovered just how important having the family around was. So yeah, it just strengthened the relationships. I think they were there. Some of them wouldn't have been. And the arrows that go out from home, her home became a community space for lots of other families. So she's a real connector in the community. She's now facilitating a self-esteem program for intermediate age children. So, it's really exciting.
That you'd say is sort of emerging leadership, that they become involved, they get some interest, something's triggered in them, and then over time, through their connections and through just participating, their capability and their confidence develops. And were there some supports that you think your initiative was able to sort of enable that to happen for her, or she got that from other places in the community?
Probably a combination, and so she got involved with some good counselling. So all of those other added supports and agencies came in to be involved as well. So it's part of a bigger package, and I guess what 303 can do is just stay alongside for a long space of time. So even this mum called in just late last term, and we hadn't seen her for a couple of years or so, but she just called in for a catch up and a chat. So it's a place where you can just touch base over many points in life, really, I guess. Yeah.
So the door's always open, and I was interested because you used a term before, you said a soft door, and I thought, God, in Wellington in the strong wind, that may not be quite good because it may blow in or sort of fold or collapse. So could you say a little bit more about a soft door?
Well, maybe you need to move to Whanganui, but the soft doors are around, it's finding points of entry for people, and I think that this diagram also shows the points of entry. There can be lots of ways of connecting, and a soft door is, I'm thinking of a mum who started with a home visit. She tried to come in the gate, which is quite high and has one of those catch things on it, because it's a childhood, it's located on an early childhood site as well. And she tried to come in several times and couldn't do it. And in her words, she says, I finally picked up the courage to do it. So it's trying to find the links that would make it easier. So our Kauai Park experiences on a Friday afternoon, that's one of them. Doing home visits is another. Just finding ways that people feel more comfortable if they've got a face or somebody that they can connect to, or we're out and about in the community. So it's not just about coming to 303. It's what else can I be involved in the community as well.
Right.
So yeah.
Now we've got another question there from someone else who's listening, asking. So Prudence.
I've got a couple of questions actually. One for Jenny and Lizzie. Community-led development can sometimes work quite differently than what the traditional funding models look like. For example, it can be long-term or not necessarily a discrete project, etc. Do you have any hints for talking with the funders and explaining how community-led development has to work?
Okay, there's a question for both. So, Lizzie, any thoughts on how you'd communicate that to someone who may be wanting to fund initiatives?
Yeah, so we actually have had some funders come in to the table in Waitangirua And the first time round when we had put through this grant, we weren't successful, but because we couldn't really explain what it was we were wanting. I didn't have the words for it really.
Right.
But the second time round when we had put it through with the People Initiative, I could describe it. I knew what it looked like, I knew what it tastes like, what it smelt like. And I was able to bring those people to the table to give them a whiff, so to speak, where it actually brought them to tears. And
right.
we actually were successful for the first time in getting funding for another
So
new initiative.
it's interesting, often when you work in a different way, it's quite hard to explain it or to describe it at first.
Yeah.
And so that's an interesting thought. Jenny, what about your experience in Whanganui? Because in many respects, a lot of what you've talked about, you know, are standard government initiatives and programs. But as you're saying, there's something different there. And as one woman said, this is more than a kindy in that. So how do you communicate that initiative that is led by the people of the local community?
It's a challenge, and it's always a challenge. So we've found some funders who will support things like parenting programs, so there's no cost at all for people wanting to do Building Awesome Whānau or Toolbox parenting programs, courses. So those are, we're really thankful for those. Trying to sell it, it is really hard, Lizzie, and I agree. I just, I don't know. I think telling the stories of our parent leaders, our parent leader facilitators telling their stories, that's quite convicting. So trying to communicate that effectively, bringing people in to have the conversation. One of the funders that still is alongside 303 regularly sends somebody into kōrero with the people, and it's not, it's just how it is on the given day, and it's not sort of set up in any way, and that's been really, it's helpful for the funder, but it's actually really helpful for parents too, because they get to see, oh gosh, this is my journey, or they may not have articulated it previously. So yeah, it's a hard one.
But it sounds like what both of you are saying is that ideally some face-to-face conversation with people who are in roles of funding really helps develop a feel and helps the language, and ideally the local people using their language and their stories is ideal, rather than other people like myself or that having to translate or interpret in that. So hey, listen, I thought, thanks for answering that question. Jenny, we'll flip back to you. We've got some other questions there that we might hopefully come back to when we have some more time. So so sorry, so back to you in terms of your diagram and maybe next slide.
Next slide sounds good. So our learning along the way, you just summed that up, David, is for the distance. It's alongside, it's having healthy boundaries, not being dependent, so not growing dependencies. It's supporting people to stand on what they want and where they want to take their journey in their life. It's about having the right personnel, and Lizzie talked about that as well. And I just think about some of the facilitators that we've had and what they've gone on to do, their dream, which may have been sitting in a place that was a bit dormant and has really grown. So some of our facilitators, one of them is still working really hard to get her children back from care, but she's now got a full-time job, so that's part of her journey in terms of trying just to be successful in that. One of our other facilitators, we had a careers person come in one day to have a kōrero, and she said, I'm not having a lemon job anymore, and I had no idea what she was talking about, but she was talking about a job that she was holding down, that she didn't want to talk about, and she decided that she wanted more from life. She had 4 kids, she had her first child at 16, and she wanted to change it up for them. And so she's gone on to complete a double degree and is now leading in a different community in different ways, supporting parents and young people using the new knowledge that she has as well. And the 303 offers just lots of layers, lots of ways of entering, and you talked too, David, about the soft doors, but there are lots of soft doors. It can be parent to parent, it can be facilitator to parent, it can be teachers to parents. There's lots of ways of connecting in. And everyone has their own journey. And it's walking collaboratively, and everyone's on their own journey. On the boat shed down by our river that flows through the middle of Whanganui, He Waka Ika Noa, we're all in this together, is painted on the side, and that kind of sums it up. We are a way of looking for strengths. We're wanting to build on people's strengths and get them to share the strengths that they've got that they don't necessarily know that they've got. And it's not always an easy journey. It can be a gentle journey, but it can have challenges along the way. But it is a journey, and in this way we're building sustainability, so communities become sustainable, and it goes on and on well beyond 303. So yeah, kia ora.
Kia ora, Jenny, thank you. That's lovely to hear that summary of obviously, you know, whizzing over a whole lot of the richness of that, but giving us a sense of that. And as we mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, there were 3 insights or lessons that we distilled out of talking to the 21 initiatives. And I think, you know, the 2 stories we've heard today have each touched on these and highlighted these in different ways. The one about the greatest asset, you know, is the people themselves in the community. And I mean, these 3 lessons all overlap with each other. Because the next one is around the dreaming again, and I think, you know, we had, you know, quite a few stories or examples of people, you know, people in the P area where their world had just narrowed right down, and a whole lot of things had just fallen out of focus, being a parent, being a friend, all that had gone. So having to dream again about that. The woman who talked about being on the couch and needing to actually move beyond and strengthen those connections she had. And I guess both of those is what you're both saying out of those places is moving to the 3rd lesson, which is around beyond just moving beyond a social service. So rather than just having a purely described, well-defined box that says this is what we do and we drop this into this community, there are those resources and that happens, but there's a whole lot of other soft doors, open tables, walk-ins. There's a whole lot of other initiatives that actually just create a safe environment and an affirming space for people maybe feeling a bit fearful or a bit inadequate in some ways to step up and actually regain and reclaim their confidence and then go on and be leaders to others. And I think you know, that process, hopefully, if we return to the theory of change, which we flashed at the beginning, hopefully that just tries to capture some of that. And so just briefly, if we look at that, that diagram, it's made up of like the figure 8 or the infinity loop or the eco cycle. And that's an initiative that has its genesis in the ecological movement, in nature. That all ecosystems, they go growth for a while, it's great, and then they go under distress or something happens, and there's a sort of creative destruction before they actually start another growth phase in that. And I think each of you touched on that, and if we had more time, we'd be talking about things aren't straight lines or linear. You know, you start an initiative, and then something, you hit a difficult situation, and it could be personality clashes, it could be funding crisis, it could be just energy dissipates for it and people stop coming. And so we have that sort of bit of a creative destruction, and it's the ability then to get through that, to get into the next phase and do some reflective learning and asking some questions. Well, what can we learn from that sometimes triggers the next? So you'll see there's a whole series of those figure 8s, and then as you move around, you start at the top with those loose connections. And I think your diagram, Jenny, illustrated that really well. That woman who, she had some connections, but they were quite loose connections. She hadn't really strengthened those relationships. So having come along to that brainwave trust and forming some courage, she then actually developed her capacity to act more. And her, you know, strengthened, I could actually take an initiative and I could host some things from my place and that. And likewise, Lizzie, with some of the the people who come to the table, the walk-in table, over time, they act. And so you just get that evolving as you move around. You move from loose connections, capability to act, then to organise and get more organised and take some initiatives and more reflect. That builds the foundation and the platform for collaboration, which if you're people who are listening into early childhood will know about this well, the whole concept of scaffolding and the whole theory around that. This is sort of scaffolding applied at a community level. And then that collaboration and things that happen there that get released in that cycle, that sometimes that triggers things in other places. And as Lizzie, you mentioned, you've just returned from Murupara, and you were invited to Murupara because what happened in conversations in Waitangirua. They heard about that through Facebook, through social media, and they invited you there, and they're going to start their journey. So they're going to start there with loose connections, and they're going to grow their capacity to act and to organise, and then the cycle goes on. So hopefully that just provides a little way of trying to understand some of that sort of, if you like, a map of that process.
David, can I just interject that loop that goes out, like there's an extra yellow bit that says capacity to grow. Is that the scale? Is that where you're thinking this becomes a pilot for something that could be much larger? Like the walk-in was just an experiment, and now you've got 7 of them. Is that what we're talking about with that capacity to grow loop outside?
Exactly that, Prudence, and particularly in this age of social media and all that, you know, people are scanning for inspiring initiatives and stories, and sometimes that is the catalyst for someone in another community, in some other part of Aotearoa or the world, to say, oh, that's quite cool, they did it there, what would it look like if we tried it here? Okay. So it's that multiplier effect.
So I think I was talking to Jo Randerson's question there. She wanted to know a little bit more info on the scale system that you were talking about. So Jo, if I have sort of got him to talk enough about that for you, you don't need to do any more, but if you've still got a question on that, please type it again or elaborate a little bit more. Can I give you another question, guys?
Yes, you can. I'll just say Jo will... there's some good websites that explain all about that, the rating scale and the PCOMs and that. And if you Google PCOMs New Zealand, there's a Partners for Outcomes Foundation is a New Zealand initiative that's supporting people use that approach to empower the participants or the local people in processes. So another question, Prudence.
Okay, this one's from Aaron Gribble. He says, perhaps this is a question for Lizzie. You mentioned that the 7 walk-ins are all volunteer run and there are no costs involved. Do you find that you exhaust volunteers doing it this way, or do you have a good roster? Or is there an aim for paid roles to remunerate people at some stage? Just wondering about the sustainability of the projects and how that's maintained.
Good question.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that because I'm doing my walk-in here in Wellington, and I don't know how long we can sustain this for because it's not governed by anybody. We're not contracted by anyone. We are just community with our own solution on the ground. So. What I do know is some of the guys up north, so the team up in Waikato, they've got their own team and they've actually got an arm from the DHB that are in there supporting them. So at the moment, the key person leading it is voluntary, but he's got the backing of an organisation, and sometimes I think that might be key at the moment. So Dannyburg, they opened their one on Friday, and again, they've got a key organisation that is just kind of gracefully holding them. So I think that would be small conversations for those people in those towns as they grow and they see the benefit of it. So a year ago, I wouldn't have thought this would have gone this big. I didn't dream this up, it just happened. But getting the Supreme Award for this, for an area that we don't even work in, alcohol and drug, it's not my space, and getting a Supreme Award says a lot about the model, I think, that is evolving here. So my hope would be someone would pick us all up and say, hey, what is this model? Let's check this out and turn it into something more real across the nation.
Thank you, Lizzie. Any comments on that, Jenny, about the risk of burning out volunteers or initiatives, you know, in a locally led? It could be, some people could say it's just another way of passing the cost on to people at, you know, with no cost to the government, and risks with it.
I think for our teams of people, the having some training around them has been really key as well. So that adds to their skills and their kete, and then when they're applying for jobs or looking for work or study or whatever's next, there's some other skills in there as well. So, and I guess it's about monitoring just where people are up to too, and just keeping an eye on things. So we've been in the fortunate place of having a paid staff person, and sometimes more than one, just having parents we can pay them for a day's facilitation. So yeah, it is about just keeping an eye on things, and for parents too to be real about what their burnout looks like.
Yeah. And thanks, Jenny. And I think that's it's always, and that's a good question. It's always a real risk in these sorts of initiatives where you've got a high volunteer input, often a mixed or low resourcing, about how you sustain the passion and energy after the initial buzz. You know, and again, it goes back to that eco cycle that sometimes you've got some really excitement in the initial phase, and then once people tire and get a bit worn out, there's actually that triggers another conversation, and maybe.
Can I add one thing in there? I've just remembered that when we run a walk-in, there's not just one or two people, there's like 5 or 6 people, and like we've just learnt, like we will roster each other so that we can avoid burnout between us, and we all carry each other, and our hope is to keep growing that team for as long as possible.
Yeah.
Look, we realise that it's 2 minutes past 3, and a few of you are asking if the slides are going to be accessible after the show. Someone's asked you for that website link that Dave mentioned. So look, just to assure you all before you drop away and have to go to your next meetings, that those slides will be made available, and we will certainly send out all the links that David has mentioned to various references. If you want to stay and listen to a few more questions, can I ask the next one?
Yes, so thank you. I realise that time is up, so some of you may need to move on to other commitments and all that. Kia ora koutou. Great to have you. Hope this has helped you sort of identify some things that you're doing really well, or triggered some other ideas. That's tremendous. You're welcome to stay on. We started about 5 or 10 minutes late, so we'll just keep some more questions. So if you want to stay on and ask some more questions, just type those questions away, and Prudence will read them out, and Jenny and Lizzie will just nail them.
Okay, so this one comes from Marilyn Head. The difference between state-funded and voluntary services. What's that difference? And when is it okay for successful voluntary models, which could be replicated to continue, being reliant on voluntary services? I think. And then she says, excuse my typing, I was thinking of Victory School and wondering why that model of primary-based health and community services is not being taken up. So the difference between state-funded and voluntary services, and how we could possibly replicate that successful voluntary model.
If I could offer a response there to that question, because that's always a good, juicy and an important question. And I think relates to the discussion we had earlier about the language we use and how we describe this. In the Child Rich Community Initiative, one of the incentives behind that was for us to get better at understanding this dynamic that happens in communities that is frequently self-organising, and to provide some common language and ways of capturing that, because that's important for part of the funding process. And as both Lizzie and Jenny said, it's sometimes quite hard to explain those very informal, or sometimes the rich things are on the margins, or they're not actually in the core program. And so, I mean, this is only part of the answer, but as we get better to actually language it and describe it, that helps us measure it, then that helps resource it and fund it. And you know, I think there's I think there's some evolution in terms of thinking beyond voluntary, in terms of, because Jenny touched on the way you train and upskill. So volunteers are not just passive people that come in, they're actually on their own learning development pathway as well that you resource. And I think, Lizzie, in the table and the people initiative, some people have come in there and moved on to. Any comments, Jenny or Lizzie, on that?
Well, I think you covered it quite well.
So do I. Yeah.
I've got another question. It's quite a simple one, really, because you're part of it already. This is Cornelia Baumgartner again saying, how can a community-led project become part of the Bright Spots?
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good question to the Bright Spots initiative, and you'll see we're keen to get feedback from people who are listening here about what would be helpful, because in a sense there's lots of bright spots out there. There's lots of initiatives across the country where people are really doing some creative things in partnership with children and with across agencies and across sectors and that. In the interim, you'll see on the slide at the moment, there's Rachel Roberts at inspiringcommunities.org. If you're really keen to hook into this more, then just email Rachel on that email address and we'll certainly put you into the mailing list. In some ways it goes back to the resourcing issue because we don't have any funding for this initiatives, but hopefully if we can tell a whole lot of compelling stories that inform evidence, hopefully there will be a little bit more resourcing that can grow the network and resource people in their local communities. Is there another question there?
Well, maybe if you could just mention that website one more time, although we'll send that link out for good measure, on the scaffolding effect and Partners for Outcomes initiatives. Can you please maybe spell that website out again? That's the last question we've got.
Yeah, again, if you've got a specific questions about PCOMs, if you email Rachel, we will send you the links and resources and contacts on that. So that's one thing we'll do. So if you have a question, want to know more about that, just email Rachel on that email address and we'll send you the links. So look, I think that's all the questions and we've gone a bit over. So Jenny, thank you very much. I hope you found it, the technology worked all right and it was, as we got going, it feels a little bit remote, but it was certainly great to have your visual and really good to hear of your initiatives there in Whanganui, and all the best for the next phase and that in Whanganui.
Kia ora.
And Lizzie, we sort of rub shoulders quite a bit around here down in Waitangirua and Wellington, so it's great to hear, always great to hear some of the things that are unfolding in that community in Waitangirua. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Hope this has been helpful, and thank you to the team here, Zeb and Prudence and Anna and Rachel, these people in the background that are writing on notes and pushing buttons to resource this webinar. And at the final thing that Rachel showed me on a whiteboard, which said, please contact us if you've got any other ideas or questions or suggestions that you think, wow, wouldn't it be neat if this network around child-rich communities could actually do this, or I'd love a resource about that. Anything that may have been triggered from this conversation, please email that into Rachel, because the more thoughts and ideas and suggestions from the broad network of people that are passionate around children in their local communities, the better that can help feed the process. So I think that's all, and from me and from the team here, kia ora anō.
Cool.